Okay, thank you, Peg, for that very nice introduction. And thank you all for coming tonight. Dark and stormy and windy and rainy. Really appreciate your endeavor to come out and see us tonight. It's a real pleasure always to read with old friends, and certainly tonight with new acquaintances. So this evening I am going to read to you an excerpt from my novel In Progress, The Last Falconer. And its protagonist is Conrad O'Keefe, and he's a man in his early 60s. The book is a contemporary story about Con's struggle to find the time to pursue his passion, which is flying his two peregrine falcons, Iris and Halo, while juggling the demands of work and family and friends. The book is also about his need, his desire to come to terms with his mortality, the mortality of his father, the mortality of falconry, which is a beloved but in America potentially a dying sport. The scene I'm going to read to you tonight takes place between Conrad and a young man named Will Hotchkiss. Will is 17. He's the son of a local rancher. He's in love with Conrad's daughter, Ellen. And Ellen was in Wyoming with Conrad for a few months. She since has gone back to live with her mom in California. When she was in Wyoming, she committed an egregious error for which Conrad, her father, has not forgiven her. A few weeks later, a second crisis occurs, and now we're about 3 weeks beyond that, and that's where this excerpt picks up. Halo continued to favor his left leg, assisting movement by flapping his wings to navigate his perch. Con kept the tercel in the living room, feeding him bits of quail and talking to him, vowing each time he recalled the accident to quit falconry altogether. It was too much to ask, committing himself time and again to a peregrine he might one day lose. There were other passions a man could pursue, training setters and pointers for sage-grouse hunters, except that this too presented a challenge, as Con would, at some point, have to return the dogs to their owners. Maybe he'd do nothing other than walk the land. If his lower back cooperated, he could spend the next 20 years combing the high mountain country of California and the deserts of Oregon. He could remain in Wyoming, or he could leave tomorrow. There was no one and nothing to keep him here. He could do now as he wanted. He sat on the couch, called Macy to him. The setter was strewn across the rug, sleeping in front of the fire, her legs splayed, pink belly visible through tufts of white hair. She raised her head at the sound of Con's voice. "Come," he said, and she got up and went to him, settling beside him on the couch. She rested her chin on his knee, and he caressed her head, lingered over the bony knot at the top of her skull, then swept his hand across her body. Her legs were hot. The fire was hot, hissing and popping now. Con's eyes grew heavy, and he might have dozed off had a pickup not pulled into the driveway. Macy lifted her head and released 2 low chuffs. Con turned to see who it was. Will Hotchkiss. Con had no interest in talking to the boy, or talking to anyone, really. In recent weeks, he had hunkered at the Eyrie, subsisting on beer, sardines, and SpaghettiOs. He wasn't in need of company or of consolation, even from Ance Jackman, the good and thoughtful neighbor who had gotten wind of Halo's accident and who had stopped by Con's house to ask if there was anything he could do. He had come to Con's dad's funeral, too, as had his wife, Elise, and the two had attended the reception at Conrad's house afterward, Elise bringing a berry pie, braids of dough on top. "Look at you," she said when she saw him, a reference to the weight he'd lost. "Do me the favor of eating 1 slice, and I won't bother you again." She had set the pie on the counter and cut him a piece, watching as he ate. The berries were tart, the crust warm in his mouth, but the confection brought him little comfort, as his father wasn't there to enjoy it with him. Will had seen Con through the living room window. There was no pretending he wasn't home. He answered the door in stockinged feet in a white t-shirt, splattered with crimson sauce. "Hello, Mr. O'Keefe," Will said. "I saw the smoke from your chimney and guessed you were home. Can I come in a minute?" His shoulders were hunched, his hands thrust into the pockets of a worn ranch jacket. Condensation puffed from his mouth. I'm kind of busy, Con said, taking care of my falcon. The boy leaned to the side somewhat to see around Con. That's what I want to talk about. It won't take long, I promise. Con stepped aside, and Will walked through the door. He brought with him the scent of wood smoke, of dug fir and charred alder. He walked over to Halo, stood a long moment, and with one finger stroked the bird's breast. I heard what happened, he said to Con, about the fence and all. Blow killed that pheasant, right? Con nodded. Will turned back toward the falcon, bent at the waist, his hands propped on his thighs as he examined Halo's leg. Will he fly again? Not with me, he won't. I'm done with all that. Who will he fly with then? If he's strong enough, some other falconer. He may not fly at all. Will stood straight now. I don't know, but if you ask me, he looks pretty good. I wouldn't know he was injured at all except for those missing feathers. I didn't ask you, Con thought but did not say. You said you had something to talk about. What's on your mind then, Will? I want to take up falconry, and I want you to be my sponsor. What part of I'm done with all this didn't you understand? But you've still got a falcon, and he needs to fly. Have you taken him out? See what he'll do? Con looked into the boy's gray blue eyes and saw the eyes of the young man's father. His jaw tightened. What I do or don't do is none of your concern. Are you saying you don't want to fly, Halo, like ever again? I'm trying to understand. Con formed his mouth to speak, to tell the kid to watch himself, as he was on the verge of crossing the line, but then Will unzipped his jacket and stood with his feet apart. If you don't fly Halo, Will went on, what'll you do with him? Pen him up like those guys who buy birds and then hold them in cages, fly them twice a year? I'm no slob falconer, if that's what you mean. What I am is sick of losing birds. You of all people ought to understand that. I didn't lose Iris. You weren't with Ellen when she took her out. You're innocent of all charges. Will turned his face from Con and chewed his lower lip. His chest rose and fell. Con imagined the boy mulling over in his mind some ridiculous response, some outlandish excuse, so that when he at last spoke, Con could call him a liar. But Will said nothing at all. More than his furrowed brow and the downward tug of his mouth, the boy's hesitation told Con that denying the accusation would help him, yes, but it would also reflect poorly on Ellen. Con envisioned the scenario, his daughter insisting she could handle the bird, that she'd watched her dad fly falcons hundreds of times. What could possibly go wrong? Will, however, had anticipated what Ellen had not, and so had refused to tag along. Con exhaled and closed his eyes, opened them again. I know you weren't there. I get that now. I'm sorry for what I said. The young man neither spoke nor nodded, just zipped up his jacket and walked out the door. The lights above the garage and the mews flickered on, throwing shadows against the snow. In the distance, the Bighorn Mountains resembled owl's ears, triangles of white and charcoal and brown. Con watched as Will pulled out of the driveway, and then his gaze turned beyond the bare trees and the telephone poles, where he again searched the western sky for a silhouette, a specter on the horizon. Thank you.